You're listening to the Mind Flipping Podcast, where you'll find tools and tips to help you renovate and update your mind and life.
Molly, thanks so much for coming back for another episode of the Mind Flipping Podcast.
I'm really happy to be here, Rick.
Awesome. Well, as I mentioned in our first episode together, I've been a longtime fan of yours. When I first got into coaching, I bought your book, The Accidental Entrepreneur. Is my memory
The
right?
Way of the Accidental Entrepreneur.
The Way of the Accidental. Excellent. And so I was excited to have you on the first time and doubly excited to have you on a second time. Yeah, thanks. So this is the little bit more informal Ask a Mind Flipper questions from our listeners. Things that have been gnawing at them perhaps since our last episode, the things they wanted to ask you and things that I wanted to ask you.
Great.
So I guess, there isn't really a standard process. So the first thing that comes to mind now, is there a common question that you get that you'd like to put out there like once and for all, or, that answer, that fact that comes through maybe?
Not at the moment, but I'm going to put that on the back burner because I wouldn't be surprised if one comes to mind.
Hopes forward.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So because I was a customer of yours and bought that book as a new coach, I know one of my questions, and I've heard it from other coaches. Well, I guess it's not a specific question. My question for you is, what are some common questions new coaches bring to you, or advice, perspective that you offer either new coaches or people that are thinking about this field?
The most common question I think I get from new coaches is, how do I get clients?
Yeah. And
I think it's an important question to consider because of what looking at it offers us, not just in terms of marketing and business. But when I hear that from a coach, it looks to me like there's something they're not seeing about coaching and about themselves and about their clients.
Okay.
That if they saw it, this wouldn't be such a big question.
And tell me more. What do you mean by that? So you obviously see and hear something that they don't know what they don't know.
I think that new coaches and often experienced coaches underestimate the value that coaching can deliver and overestimate what they have to do to make that value happen.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So there's a way in which it looks like, as a new coach, I have to sell myself. And it's like, the good news is that it's not yourself you have to sell.
Mm-hmm.
You just, as your conviction that coaching as a process, as a way of engaging the intelligence in the client, in the intelligence of life, as your experience of that and your trust in that deepens, it becomes natural to make a case that that's a good thing. So it's not a matter of persuading it. It's just like saying, Rick, I can help you with that. Not because I'm a freaking genius, right, but because coaching as a way of accessing intelligence works. So that's one piece that I think and that it works not because the coach is so brilliant, but because there's an intelligence in life. It's like, my teacher is the apple tree outside my window.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to work at being a great apple tree. And the coaching looks to me like is a modality that emerged out of appreciation for the natural learning and growth capacity of human beings. And that takes a lot of pressure off us as coaches, because it's like the solution, the way forward is available, just like the way to set blossoms is available to that apple tree.
Just let it happen.
Yeah. Now I know that's simple and not always easy.
Right.
And as we understand it, it becomes easier because it becomes clearer.
Yeah. So I think that's a couple of things there, a couple of keywords for new coaches that you mentioned. There's that sense of pressure. I've invested time and money.
Mm-hmm.
Now I need a return on my investment. So there's that pressure of me being the one to produce this.
Yeah.
And then the other word is the understanding that takes time. You know, you get trained as a coach, but until you participate, it's hard to understand. And really, unless you have awesome training,
Yep.
you know, and long time mentorship, to understand the process and that it's not you and it's a process, and it's even
Yeah.
beyond not really a process.
Yeah, it takes insight, and sometimes it looks like insight or understanding comes over time. Some people, they get just hit by it in an instant, which kind of irritates me. It's like, hello, I've been in line
Right.
here.
One of them.
Yeah, one of them. And I think that receiving coaching, that was really important for me. I invested in hiring coaches, and before I paid myself, I paid coaches. And I want to be careful there, because I really dislike and don't believe in the mindset that, oh, you got to spend a lot of money to make money and sign up for my $15,000 a year diamond platinum program. I think that's hogwash.
Yeah.
Hire a coach who's a little more experienced than you are, who maybe charges a little more than you're ready to charge. You know, just stretch
Mm-hmm.
and let yourself be coached. And then you can say with integrity, you know, what I know about coaching is that it helps blah, blah. You know, you have actual experience that coaching makes a difference.
Yeah. That's a great way of looking at it. I appreciate your hogwash comment, because that's, for somebody who's been in the coaching field a long time, that's a valuable perspective.
Yeah, and that was the politest word I could come up with.
I sense that.
Trying to be well behaved.
Well, let loose. It should defend.
Uh-oh.
Could be fun. So,
Yeah.
but I love that. Yeah. There is great value in it. And I like how you said, perhaps when it feels right, a bit of a stretch, spending a bit, you know, all things considered, if it's right, but not painful, not, you know.
It should not feel like a nail biting, lying awake at night worrying about how you're going to pay your rent because you invested in a coaching program, or how you're going to explain to your significant other that you just put $15,000 on your credit card.
Doesn't have to be done.
No. And, you know, that might be a fine investment for somebody. I don't think it is for most people.
Most people,
And
yeah.
if you're reaching out of the hope, it's like there's a magical thinking. If I spend enough money and am sufficiently uncomfortable and am bold in my choices, magic will happen. And it's like, well, no, it won't.
Yeah, and we want to believe that.
We do. I've done it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm speaking from experience.
And to your point, you know, you mentioned earlier, there are those line jumpers. There are those few that have that insight.
I know.
You know, that they just get it. And so maybe those are the few, those gifted few that, boom, they're in the flow. They can spend the 10 to 15 grand and they nail it.
Yeah, more power to them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we can kind of feel, I think this is another underappreciated thing we have going for us when it comes to building a practice, is we can kind of feel what's native to the kind of critter we are. It's like, no, I'm going to be out of I have to jump out of myself to go do that. I'd have to be a different kind of person to do that. Or that scares me a little bit. You know, I totally believe in stretch, but
Right.
you can feel, it's like, yeah, that speaks to me. I could imagine being the coach that did that. That you know, some people are going to enjoy speaking, for example.
Right.
And speaking is a terrific way to build a practice. If you really despise public speaking, I think it'd be a rather naive and foolish thing to invest in speaking.
Right.
Unless you get some, you know, real inkling that that's next on your path, that's fine.
Sure.
But that's real different from thinking you should be a speaker because you should.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Thinking versus feeling. Thinking I
Mm-hmm.
should be a speaker versus that.
Yeah.
All right. It feels like, as difficult as it may be, this is the next step for me.
Exactly.
So thank you for admitting that you've been there, you've made mistakes, had poor investments, and
Yep. More than one.
with a little bit of
And it
hogwash.
wasn't the fault of the program. It was very much what we're talking about. It was my magical thinking that made it not appropriate, because some of those were really useful programs for the right people, but I was not the right person. I was just the wishful person.
Yeah, wishful thinking, magical thinking. So you touched on, perhaps you were a bit more up here than down
Yeah.
here. And is that something, I know you are a creative, sensitive person, imaginative person, and those typically can tap into their intuition. Is that something that's always been natural to you, or is that something that you had to learn how to listen to your heart, to your
I think
intuition?
both.
Okay.
It looks to me, there have been moments throughout my life when I've had an insight or an intuition or a realization that have been pivotal. And I remember those since I was a little girl. And then long periods when I'm trying to find my way by thinking.
Yeah.
And those were a little more tedious.
And the more we
And I
smack
think
ourselves in the head.
intuition looks different for different people. I've worked with clients who thought they weren't intuitive, and it's like, well, you got intuition to beat the band. You just think yours should look like theirs, and it doesn't.
Say that again. What do you mean by that?
Well, we have concepts about intuition, like some people have an experience of intuition that comes with a sense of purpose. And this is just an example. They might, this feels like it's on purpose for me. I feel passionate. I feel aligned. They might describe it that way. And somebody else might have a perfectly fine inkling about where to go, but they're not getting any downloads about passion and purpose. So they think, I have to go get passion and purpose. It's like, no, you just got to listen, notice the guidance, the inkling, the insights that are coming to you. It's like your GPS is going to deliver something keyed to you. And it's just not going to have the same map and the same, it's not going to sound and smell and feel like somebody else's.
Yeah. Okay. So you may have read in the book that, you'll know it, or it'll feel like your purpose, your passion. And yet for you, it might be something else. It might be a little nudge. It might be an image. It might be a voice.
It could be an image. It could even seem like a good idea, something you read in the book and you think, well, I shouldn't trust what I read in the book because I know I'm supposed to trust myself. And it's like, if it comes to you, and I wish I could be more specific about this, Rick, but the marvelous thing is these inklings and intuitions are so customized that you can't really generalize except to say everybody's got one.
Right. Find yours.
Find yours. Appreciate yours.
Yeah.
We've all had times in our lives when we've made better and worse choices. And it could be useful to reflect on how'd that happen,
Right.
and not over, excuse me, not over determine it, but just be curious. Like, is there something there I can recognize?
Yeah. I like it. And so we do recognize, as you're saying, kind of review, go back, the good decisions, or, what was happening there. You mentioned you remember intuitive moments.
Yeah.
Any you want to share? You said all the way back to when you were a child? Or?
Yeah. One that was so big to me, and it was maybe one of the first big ones. I was, excuse me, I have this creaky throat.
No problem.
I think I was 14, come to think of it. And I had a miserable freshman year of high school. Just miserable. And in fact, I have to tell a bit of the backstory. Early in freshman year of high school, I showed up to a school dance. I went to a small Catholic high school in Boise, Idaho. I went to my first school dance and somebody, a boy from another high school, a non-Catholic high school, was there, and we danced, and he asked if I wanted to step outside, and I did. It was hot, so I did, and then he kissed me. And I mean, I am like, I think at the time I was still 13. I mean, I know nothing. So we go back inside, and the next thing I know, I have a reputation. Like,
oh, geez.
and I don't know how big the reputation was, but it seemed to me it was very, very big.
And it spread pretty quickly.
It spread very quickly. And I had no way to handle that,
Aww.
that I knew of. So that defined a lot of my experience of that year in my own mind.
Yeah, of course.
And the summer after that year, I remember sitting on my bed in my bedroom, and I don't know why it happened. I realized that didn't have to define my sophomore year. It was just crystal clear that there's no relation. That's not happening now. That never has described who I am. I get to be who I am, and I don't even have to know what that is. I just have to show up, see what it is. And I had an entirely different sophomore year. And it was not the result of affirmations or efforts. I did not reinvent myself. What I saw was the potential for reinvention to happen. It was really wonderful. I'll never forget it.
Wow. What a wonderful story. And I can even sense a great feeling to tap back into, a knowing of.
And you know, what a gift. I wasn't reading a wise book. I didn't talk to anybody. I wasn't going to tell an adult about it. It just came. There's so much available to us for free,
Yeah.
without effort.
And you tapped into it and you took it and you ran with it.
Somehow I had the grace to recognize it and ran with it. And it somehow that also taught me, although I haven't always lived this way, but it left me with the knowledge that kind of moment was always available. It didn't leave me with the magic code to make that moment happen, but I could never forget that it was available.
I love it. All right. So this wasn't a planned question, but it's coming up, and this is just a chill and chat. So
yeah.
I'm going to throw it out there. I've got an upcoming guest I'll be interviewing, Mark Goldberg, who's the author of The End of Upside Down Thinking. And the subtitle is, I'm going to butcher it, but it's about recognizing, according to his scientific, not his research, his summary of scientific research, that consciousness doesn't come from our brain. And it was a fantastic book. So Mark and I talk in a couple of days. Yeah. And that book rates up there for me. And I love Audible because it's hard for me to sit still and get through a book. I got through his book. It was fantastic. And I put it in line with, for me, probably the first one was The Power of Positive Thinking, which ties into that greater consciousness. Return to Love by Marianne Williamson.
Mm-hmm.
Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. And a couple of Three Principles books, Inside Out Revolution and Clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll pose you the question that I posed a few of our listeners. Where does consciousness come from?
I have no freaking idea, but it's cool that it's there.
Does it come from us? Does it come from our brain?
Oh, no, I do know that.
Okay.
I mean, there is probably, this is what makes sense to me, that there's a biological correlate for consciousness.
Okay.
So it doesn't surprise me that we can correlate biological, neurochemical, neurological things with the presence or absence or changes in consciousness.
Of different awarenesses.
It's like the container. But consciousness itself looks to me like, I understand it to be an aspect of the intelligence of life that runs through everything.
The apple tree you mentioned.
The apple tree.
Yeah.
And it's not that the apple tree doesn't have consciousness. It's in the form that I've got it because it's an apple tree. Right. For all I know, it's superior.
Sure.
Yeah, but that's how I understand consciousness. Is it's got, from my human perspective, two dimensions. It's got the infinite universal dimension where it's the field of awareness that contains everything.
Okay. Yeah.
And then as an individual, a face or facet or aspect of that field, I have an experience of personal consciousness that feels like it's contained by me and unique to me, but it's really just like a facet of a diamond. It's the light's coming off that facet and it feels like that facet's doing a great job, but it's just part of the diamond.
Just one part. I like that. Very good. So I won't get into the book too much. I'll let you and our listeners.
Yes, I can't
tune
wait.
in. It'll be a great conversation. The book is awesome, and that'll be in upcoming show notes. But coming back to you, how does that principle or thought that there is a consciousness beyond our brain tap into the work you do? And perhaps it comes back to that question for new coaches.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Because we underappreciate that there's that capacity. It's more than a capacity, but it's like the intelligence of life is at your service.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean it's going to follow your directions.
Right.
Because that would be a foolish move on its part.
Right.
It's intelligent.
Chaos would ensue.
Yeah, why would it?
I like that.
But there is, and that's, I actually had a 3 principles intensive this week with a client, and today was we had 2 sessions a day for 4 days, and today was the final session of that series. And she was reflecting a lot about consciousness.
Okay.
And what she was appreciating was how much is available. I mean, she was having an experience of consciousness that had the sense that there's a lot available there, and it's not defined by what we're experiencing in this moment. Because, you're not stuck with what you've got right now. Wait a minute, and like the weather, it'll change.
Yeah.
So consciousness is vast, possibilities are infinite, and there's something can be profoundly relaxing about that. You don't have to figure things out because there's something happening. The dance is already happening. And I'm just noticing, Rick, I don't want to, sometimes when I wax lyrical, I just think, on the one hand, hogwash. And on the other hand, it's like I start trying to sell a point of view, and I really don't want to do that.
Sure.
I just want to point people toward, somehow, how would I point people toward consciousness as we're talking about it? It's just really useful to know it's way bigger than we are. And it's like there's more where that came from. So if you've got an idea and it's not working for you, there's more where that came from.
Yeah. So as you're talking about that, I get your concern because it is easy to kind of wax philosophical or have the fear that I'm going somewhere where I don't need to go, but it's hard to talk about these types of things in more concrete terms. One of the things or a metaphors that I don't remember if perhaps it was in Inside Out Revolution by Michael Neal that I think helps me is for the perspective of what we can tap into is our perspective, like in a high rise, starting out at the ground.
In a glass elevator.
Glass elevator, that's what it was. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you want to share on that?
I do.
Okay.
So Michael uses the metaphor of being in a glass elevator for what Sid Banks called levels of consciousness. And if you can imagine yourself in a glass elevator on the outside of a high rise, and down in the basement, below the parking garage, you look out and it's pretty grim. It's a limited horizon. As the elevator rises, you just naturally see more. the same reality is going on, the same potential is going on, but from the level at which your understanding rests, you see a different landscape.
So it was always there.
It's always there.
Just couldn't see it.
Yeah. And when we're, as I frequently am, it's like another thing to know is this elevator's always moving and you're not in charge of the controls. If you're in the basement and you try to move the elevator by punching the panel, it doesn't work. It doesn't help. All it really does is leave you with a worse experience of the crappy place you are. Like, not only do I not like this, I really don't like this. And it seems like when we do that, there's almost a way at which we jam the elevator. We get stuck at a level. The harder we try to change it. And as soon as we let it go, the possibility of it moving returns. Now, it may still take days, hours, months, but knowing that that elevator moves, that's the nature of the elevator. That
it's going to. I love that. And we've all felt that. The more I try to move this sucker, God, it's just not working.
I hate that.
Yeah.
And it's really seductive, though. I mean, in a way, it's beautiful about us because it speaks to our willingness to be responsible. And again, this is a lot of what this client and I looked at this week is you're just not. You're response able. You're allowed to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Something in that intelligence of life likes to do stuff through us. So go do stuff. But you are not responsible for doing the right stuff, because how would you know?
Nice.
In what time frame is it right? According to whose life plan is it right? It's like, and it's okay to make up stories about where you want to go and have kind of a temporary and transient notion of it's right because if I get my coaching certificate, it's right. That's perfectly okay to play that way.
Yeah.
But we're just playing a game. You know, there's no ultimate rightness about getting that certificate.
Yeah, you might slide down a different chute or have to climb up a different ladder.
Exactly. And how many times have we all had that happen? And how many people can look back and say the worst thing that ever happened to me was the best thing?
Oh, absolutely.
So I love that chutes and ladders metaphors because we don't even know whether it's the chute or the ladder.
Right. Until the elevator changes position.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm really enjoying about talking with you, Rick, is how fluid you are with metaphors. You know, sometimes I feel like I have to apologize because I mix metaphors terribly. It's like, could we get 6 in here? We're only with 5 right now.
Welcome to the club. Yeah.
And you switch them elegantly. I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. I'm not always so elegant. In fact, I'm usually not. So I appreciate that. All right. Let me see. Another question here that was sent in. So we've touched on 3 principles in our last chat, and we'll tie our first episode in the show notes. We touched on what that is, so we don't need to go into it too much, but it is a little bit, at least for me, maybe for you still, difficult to explain.
It is. Yeah.
3 principles. Have you come up with is there a better name for it? Do you go out and talk about, speaking of doing talks, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't usually talk about the 3 principles.
Sure. That makes sense.
It's just too much like selling another religion or something.
Yep.
But it's
not.
But it's not,
right.
At all. Jamie Smart is playing with the term subtractive psychology.
Okay.
That's possible. It's kind of long.
Right.
What in practice I usually do is I key it to what I'm seeing in the person in front of me that I think will be helpful.
Perfect.
So sometimes I'll just, for example, talking to a prospective client, I never know in advance if I'm going to propose that we do an immersion or intensive in the 3 principles, or if we'll start out with what might look like more conventional coaching. all my coaching is informed and based on the principles, but
Yes.
it's not all talking about the principles.
Right.
And if I have a new client who wants something, who presents a problem that to them is very compelling, and it looks to me like they can't arrive at an answer from the level they're at,
Mm-hmm.
from the place on the elevator they're at, and they don't seem to have an awareness that that elevator moves, then I'm going to say something like that. And I might say something like, I really understand you've got some decisions to make about whether to stay with your company or change careers. If you stay, you've got questions about branding. You've got pressure about whether to bring in blah, blah, how to invest. Respect all that, and I would love to help you with that. And I notice that the velocity of your thinking about that and the pressure on you to get the right answer looks to me like it has you really kind of ramped up. And I think that in order for you to see the answers you want, you need to be able to settle down, to dial it back. And so I would propose that we would first start on helping you get some insight into how all that works so that you can be confident about your decisions, whatever they are. So that's one way I talk about it.
Yep.
And I haven't mentioned mind, consciousness, and thought.
Right.
I would if it made sense to me, and I used to.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was supposed to.
Sure.
Does that begin to answer your question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for our listeners that are in similar fields, perhaps they're not coaches, but they're hypnotherapists, or they're, in other healing modalities, Reiki, or into meditation. If they've been doing it for a while, they recognize that that's probably how they work as well. They don't do it the way they used to do it, and they bring it in according to the heart and soul that's in front of them. And
right. In the beginning, when we see something that's really often makes sense to us, or we think that we need to teach people what we learned.
Yeah.
That's
that
okay.
sense, yeah. And there's a sense of practice. There's a sense of the more I teach it, the more I'll know it. So I'm practicing, and
Yeah.
yeah.
But the principles are a way of talking about the intelligence behind life and just the principles that govern human experience. So there's nothing to believe. There's just something that can be useful to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you don't have to believe in gravity. Gravity doesn't care. And you're not going to go to hell if you don't believe in gravity.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you're in the habit of throwing rocks in the air and being surprised when they come down, especially if they bonk you or your kids on the head, it could be useful to take a look at the principle of what goes up must come down.
Right.
And so it's in that spirit that I look at these principles behind human experience. If you're accustomed to thinking harder, as many of us are, about things, if you're accustomed to believing that how you feel tells you how you're doing and tells you what your prospects are, like I feel depressed, therefore my prospects are limited, then it can be really helpful to see through that veil of thought and feeling and go, they're actually not telling me anything except what I'm thinking, and if I leave it alone, that'll move.
Yeah. I mean, just that's so powerful.
It's amazing.
That phrase, yeah. And I'm sure there are listeners that are going, hold it. What was that? That sounds too simple, but there's some.
Yeah, as I said to
power
a
in
client today, I said, I know you want to feel better. And I said, I got to tell you, I don't care how you feel. I'm not worried about how you feel. And my goal for our intensive is for you not to care how you feel either.
Nice. And what happened after that? What was his or her response? And
at the time, I think she was a little shocked. Like,
Yeah.
I want my money back.
Right. This isn't what I think I hired you for.
Yeah. Yeah. And she did, though. She got a feel for that. And I said, I'm not that you're not going to continue to have preferences about how you feel. I do.
Yeah.
But it's nice not to worry about it. I have a low day, and it's like I have a low day, but it's about as significant as it's raining and I'm going to have a picnic. It's like, Yeah, it wasn't my plan, but it doesn't end my days of having fun. And being low doesn't end my days of being productive.
That's so powerful that, I guess my experience is that that's the exception. Most people, don't have that perspective, don't realize
That's
that.
true. I didn't.
Yeah. And so much of our life is, that roller coaster of I'm feeling this and this is where I am and who knows how long, and just getting lost in that whirlpool of the moment. And you
Absolutely.
have that realization that it will pass, and where did this feeling come from? And open up a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Another question. What do you need help with?
What do I need help with? I'm pausing, Rick, because I'm just trying to, for me, I mean, on the face of it, that's a very easy to understand question.
Sure.
And in terms of, I need help. I think it would be nice to have help in our yard.
Excellent.
This time of year,
Now, where are you located?
Suquamish, Washington, between Bainbridge and Paulsbo, west of Seattle. Yeah, I need help with my yard.
Is it sprouting, just wet, moist?
It is sprouting like crazy. This part of the world, it's a jungle.
Okay.
And the jungle is just beginning to break out of the ground. And the weeds are there, and we have a large, by our standards, vegetable garden. And the last few years, we've treated ourselves to hiring someone to weed it and turn the dirt.
Awesome.
And this year, our wonderful person has disappeared. So, yeah, looking for somebody else.
So the hunt is on.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. So gardener, we put it out to the universe.
That's great. I love that.
Let the right gardener show up. And there's not a much better metaphor for the work we do than gardening.
I know. It really is. It really is. And there's nothing quite like gardening for clearing my mind for things to show up too. It's just really helpful.
Yeah. Awesome.
So in the worst case, I'll have to go out and pull my own weeds, and that'll be good for me.
Yeah. The worst may not be so bad.
Exactly. It's a chute that turns into a ladder.
I like it. Pulling in the chute. Excellent. Well, good. Well, let's wrap it up there.
Okay.
We'll keep it simple. Any final thoughts, things you want to share about exciting things, spring and summer of 2019 and in Molly's life? And
well, I'm really excited about. You've mentioned the 3 principles a few times, and we'll just use that as a shorthand.
Perfect.
I'm really excited about sharing that more and more with coaches who weren't trained in that background, and also sharing the skill set of coaches with people who are learning the principles and want to share them, but don't know how.
Yeah.
And my belief that coaching is a perfect modality because it has such respect for the client's ability to find answers. So that's what I'm up to, and I'm doing a bunch of demo coaching series where I call it Without a Net.
Nice.
I just coach clients in front of an intimate group of other coaches, like 12 coaches, and then we talk about it. And, I could bomb, and we can talk about that. And we talk about it in terms of the principles, and we also talk about it in terms of the International Coach Federation standards. So
awesome.
It's a hybrid that I'm really excited about.
All right. From hybrid to high wire, if you're looking for a volunteer to go on the higher wire with you,
Exactly.
Put my name on the list. I'd be happy to hop into the
super good to know
into the ring with you. And if somebody wants to view your Act Without a Net, where can they find information on these couple of areas that you're excited about?
Probably the easiest place for people right now is to look at my Facebook page. If you look me up on Facebook, Facebook.com/Shaboom Inc.
So SHABOOM
INC.
INC, Shaboom Inc. Or they could probably just put that Shaboom Inc. in the search bar.
And they will find my website, and you can always email me. I'm not always on top of these days updating my website with my offers, believe it or not.
That's shocking. Shocking.
I know, it's so funny. And I taught marketing for years. I haven't done any marketing in 7 or 8 months, and I just had my best month ever. So go figure.
That's a wonderful problem to have.
It is.
No time to market. I love it. Awesome. Well, good. So we'll put those links in the show notes as well for this episode of Ask a Mind Flipper. Thank you so much, Molly, for all you do and for your time today.
Thank you, Rick. It's been a pleasure to see you again. Bye-bye.